What's good, everybody? Welcome to part 6 of What If Deku was Isekai'd into Naruto. Now, today's video is actually going to be a little bit of a special one because in today's video, I want you all to decide who the editor for the channel will be. Now, part 5 was edited by the absolute legend M2B, and part 6 will be edited by the man known as Beastie. Now, both of them did a pretty great job, and honestly, I can't decide which one I like more, so I decided to let you guys all pick who was going to be the main editor for the channel. Choose wisely, and with that being said, let's get started.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
We pick our story right back off after Sasuke had just been kidnapped by the Sound 4. Now, like I said in the previous story, Sasuke would have tried to put a fight against them, but it was 4 against 1, and ultimately Sasuke is not skilled enough yet to take them down. So, through the cover of the night, the Sound 4 were able to take Sasuke away, with nobody being none the wiser. After these events, Tsunade, realizing that Sasuke is gone when they had a team meeting, would end up deciding that they are going to be needing to find out what happened. They would end up going back to the Uchiha corner, which, you know, they were all delegated to, and they would end up finding out that Sasuke clearly had some signs of distress in his home, and that there clearly was a battle. So after finding this out, she would end up deducing that they definitely had taken Sasuke away. And after finding this out, they would all end up pretty much each and every single person who was, you know, part of the team and anyone who really knew Sasuke, including the Genin, would all decide that they're going to be going on the mission. And the leader would still be Shikamaru, since he's the only Chunin. So they would all end up pretty much going on the same mission, just like in the original. The only minor change to the story from this point is the fact that Sakura doesn't end up making Naruto promise to bring Sasuke back. They never end up having that moment, since Sakura, well, to put it lightly, is not an important figure in this story. So instead, what ends up happening is the team would immediately rush off to go find Sasuke as soon as they possibly could. Now, following this event, a couple of hours would go by when they would finally end up encountering the Sound 4. Now, once they do encounter the Sound 4, they would end up ultimately being trapped by Jirobo's mud prison jutsu. I forget what the name of it was exactly, but that huge dome that the team was engulfed in, and they had their chakra slowly sucked out of them. That pretty much ends up almost going to canon, except the one change is now that since Deku's around, he's actually able to help come up with a solution alongside Shikamaru. So they're able to escape a lot faster, and ultimately Choji is the one who decides to stay back and fight against this Sound 4 member. The team would then go forward, and this is when everything pretty much remains constant in the story. Deku being here doesn't really change the battles that would end up going down, and seeing as we've already seen the battles in live action, I don't really think that there's much of a reason for me to even cover them. Neji still ends up getting impaled by an arrow, you know, the Gaara squad ends up coming in and saving Akamaru and Kiba, and that kind of stuff stays more constant, more or less. That being said, at this point, Deku and Naruto would be the ones who are running full speed. Now, once they end up getting close to Sasuke, they would end up encountering another obstacle for them to face, Kimimaro, one of the most powerful underlings of Orochimaru. Now, in the original story, Naruto essentially tried to defeat Kimimaro and get past him through the means of just throwing chakra at him. He just threw attack after attack after attack, but Kimimaro, seeing as, you know, he is a prodigy, was able to dodge and weave and just counter everything, leaving Naruto to find out that he's ultimately useless. He didn't have a single counter to Kimimaro's attacks, and that led to the downfall of Naruto. However, this time he's going to be having somebody there who's more thinking clearly and isn't simply trying to throw attacks. So you could think of it as Naruto being the battery and Deku being kind of the outlet, like letting everything flow without wasting too much power. So instead of Naruto just, surrounding him with tons of attacks and just ultimately failing, Deku would suggest creating a bunch of Shadow Clone Jutsus to try to attack Kimimaro to keep him distracted for a bit. and for them to have enough time to be devising a plan. Now, from this point forward, they would proceed to start creating a bunch of plans, and Deku and Naruto would both end up pretty much being like, okay, how do we pull this off, and how do we defeat Kimimaro? The plan would go as follows. Deku was going to be Deku was kind of going to be a diversion, and Naruto is going to be coming in using a Rasengan, because both of them actually ended up learning it. By this point, they've already had an extra week in order to try to learn the balloon part. They had more than enough time to learn the rubber ball part, and they were ultimately both able to figure out how to create the Rasengan. Naruto still does need a clone, however Deku doesn't. Deku's able to create the Rasengan with one hand alone, similar to Kakashi, because he doesn't have an insane amount of chakra that he needs to have molded. Deku is exceptional at molding chakra, so he's able to be kind of the person who just rushes in there and tries to hold Kimimaro off. Along the lines, Kimimaro would actually get hit with Naruto's Rasengan, and it would actually cause Kimimaro to get blown back. However, when he gets up, he would say that this is not where his story ends, and that his dream is to live for Orochimaru. As soon as he hears this determination and will come out of the mouth of Kimimaro, Deku's eyes would kind of widen, as we would have a little bit of a moment where Deku kind of thinks internally, he's just like me. We both wanted to kind of live up to certain standards. We both wanted to be enough for certain somebody. We both wanted to be the heroes, you know what I mean? Deku sees this in a way that, you know, he wanted to live for All Might, and All Might was his dream and his hero, and Orochimaru is Kimimaru's dream and his hero. So after hearing him say that, he would think, he's just like me. Deku would end up yelling out to him that I guess they'll be finding out whose will is more powerful, his or Kimimaru's, as he rushes in to try to fight Kimimaru one-on-one, but Kimimaru ultimately outclasses Deku, and he ends up making quick work of him, causing Deku to be thrown into the sidelines. Naruto, seeing this, would end up going into a chakra cloak mode, which he ends up using to slightly start evening out the odds in terms of him versus Kimimaru, but he's still able to actually overcome this. This is when Rock Lee would end up inevitably arriving, and his arrival would end up changing the entire course of the battle. We all know how this all goes. Drunken Lee stays behind and faces Kimimaru until inevitably Gaara would come in and save the day, and when they were both barely about to be defeated, Kimimaru would lose his life in the field of the battle. So, with that all being said, since Deku and Naruto had enough time to go after Sasuke and chase him, we would end up at the same spot like we do in the original, the Valley of the End, where Hashirama and Madara statues stay firmly planted. As soon as they arrive to Sasuke at this point, who has now actually felt a taste of what Orochimaru's power can feel like, is now currently having a little bit of a moment where he's questioning whether he should or shouldn't go with Orochimaru. Sure, training with Kakashi and everybody else could give him strength, but this power was immediate. He feels a huge increase. He's about 2 times stronger than he was before. This power that was bestowed upon him, it's given him enlightenment, I guess you could say, in his own eyes. And him feeling this power is kind of drunken with it, I guess you could say, as he doesn't want to give it up, and he wants more power from Orochimaru, essentially. So when Deku and Naruto arrive, he ends up telling them to leave him and that he's going to be searching for power through the route of hatred. It doesn't matter what he has to do, he's gonna kill his brother Itachi. Naruto and Deku would both scream at him, telling him that he's an idiot, asking him why he would go down that path when he has friends who can help him get there, that he doesn't have to do it alone. But Sasuke would stay silent as he looks down and says, "You don't know nothing about it, Naruto. You didn't have family to begin with, and you don't have one now. So what could you possibly tell me about revenge or about losing everything you once held dear to yourself?" Naruto would stay silent, saying, "I can't. But we're your family now, Sasuke. The family you once had is now gone. There's nothing you can do about it. But we're here. We'll help you defeat Itachi. Together." But Sasuke would say no. And, from here, Naruto would grit his teeth before saying, "I'm gonna bring you back to the village, even if I have to break every bone in your body." And so, from here, Sasuke, hearing that, would say, "I'd love to see you try." Naruto would then get enraged and look at Deku before saying that he wants him to stay out of this battle. Deku would say he can't do that, but he would then see the look in Naruto's eyes and he would decide that he ultimately is going to have to let Naruto handle this one alone. Deku simply stands back as he watches the entire Naruto versus Sasuke battle go down just like it does in the original. This time, it's actually a little more powerful on both ends because this version of Sasuke is a little stronger than the one in the original, and this version of Naruto is also a little bit more powerful and tactically sound than the Naruto that we have in the original. So the battle is a little more or less the same, but their attacks are a little more powerful, if that makes sense. That being said, this is when the Naruto and versus Sasuke fight would end up ultimately coming to a close when Sasuke would end up activating his Curse Mark Stage 2 and Naruto would end up activating his one-tailed Chakra Cloak. He would end up rushing in at Sasuke as they both scream each other's names, and it is during this fight that Naruto and Sasuke would both realize just how similar both of them truly are to each other and how much they both had in common, because through battling with fists, they both kind of spoke to one another and were able to realize things about each other that they didn't understand before. And Sasuke is kind of having his will to leave the village weaken little by little as the battle goes on, with Sasuke ultimately actually wanting Naruto to have won. But after the clash was over with the Chidori and the Purple Rasengan, Sasuke ultimately stands atop as Naruto would actually sink into the water and Deku jumps straight into the pit as he grabs Naruto out of the water and drags him back onto land as he sees Sasuke standing in the rain, and Deku would put his hands up before saying, "Naruto may not have been the one to take you in, but I will. There's no way that even with that power that you have currently, you'll be able to defeat me." And at this point, Sasuke's Curse Mark 2 state would start kind of eating away at him, so he would be forced to pretty much deactivate it. Before Sasuke then has his 2 Tomoe Sharingan activated in both eyes, he would say, "Try it." Before at this point, Deku then rushes in and pretty much ends up fighting against Sasuke, trying to hold him off as long as possible. But one thing that is ultimately clear to both of them is Deku is completely outclassed at this point. Deku at this point does not have the power or the resolve or anything that he needs to make sure Sasuke stays for any longer than about 5 minutes. So the battle would pretty much be a very quick one, where Sasuke is essentially beating on Deku blow after blow after blow, destroying him and weakening his will as the time goes on. The only reason that Deku would have stayed standing for this long is because Naruto wouldn't have ever forgiven him, or he thinks, if he were to let Sasuke go. So that would kind of push Deku to stay standing even when he felt as if he couldn't. And that would have actually ended up being one of the greatest things Deku could have ever done. He stood up for what he believed in, and he didn't let his friend go. As we know in the story of My Hero Academia, Deku views friendship and relationships as something close, something that should be cherished, something that is important to his figure, something that Deku lives by. So by the same, merit, we have Deku at this point now trying to hold off just long enough so that Sasuke could kind of come back to the village. But having this realization of him being too weak, it would definitely hit him. It would hit him where it hurts this time. However, one person would end up arriving to the battlefield that would end up changing the entire course of Naruto history. Kakashi Hatake. He ends up arriving and seeing Naruto pretty much passed out and seeing Sasuke beating on Naruto. However, as soon as he sees this, he would reveal his Sharingan and rush down as he would proceed to knock Sasuke out and drag all 3 of them back to the village, as well as an Anbu team would come in and pretty much help with the healing of everybody else who was hurt in this battle. The Sasuke retrieval arc would be over, and this time it's going to be causing major changes in the story of Naruto. A couple of days would go by, and Naruto and Sasuke, as well as Deku, would all kind of be healed. Sasuke would be one of the last ones to wake up, but when he does open his eyes, he would see 3 figures standing over him: Kakashi, Deku, and Naruto. As he would remember everything that had happened, he would have pretty much been seeing these events play through his head over and over and over and over. And he'd see the error of his ways when he sees Deku, Naruto, and Kakashi holding no types of grudge against Sasuke. They're all smiling, saying that it wasn't his fault. He was manipulated by Orochimaru. But Sasuke would sit up as he silently just stares at them and says, how they could forgive him after what he did. Orochimaru took him away, yes, but after he was free, he could have actually joined them in that instant and helped them. But that power that he felt, he would tighten his fist before saying, it was incredible. Deku would look at Sasuke before saying that they can gain that same type of power themselves, and that all they have to do is train hard enough. Sasuke now has that power regardless of anything, and they can all work together to become stronger as a whole. Sasuke would then look down before pretty much apologizing through tears to the team, telling them that he was sorry for what he did and that it won't happen again. Deku, Naruto would pretty much both smile as Deku would just have tears and tears spewing out of his eyes, just pretty much crying, being like, Sasuke! You know what I mean? As this man is just an absolute train wreck of emotions at this moment. And so the whole room would pretty much be filled with anime tears as they all begin drowning. I'm totally kidding, that doesn't happen. But Deku is clearly crying up a whole ocean right now. And so Naruto has to hit him across the head, making Deku stop crying, saying, stop being so sentimental. As you know, the whole group laughs, and it is from here that the 3-year time skip would commence. Now, keep in mind, in this version of events, Sasuke never ends up going off with Orochimaru. That means that Naruto isn't going to be training to have Sasuke come back. Instead, his motivation this time around is to pretty much be able to protect his brother Deku. He failed when he let Deku have to fight a battle that he promised he was going to win. Not only that, but Naruto wants to become more powerful to defend himself against the Akatsuki members. Deku, his motivation for training goes more along the lines of wanting to better himself after seeing just how much of an obsolete figure he became when it comes to him standing next to Sasuke and Naruto. They're both gifted prodigies. Sasuke has the Sharingan, he has the curse mark, Naruto has the Rasengan, he has an insane amount of chakra and the 9-tailed beast. They're both just completely outclassing him at this moment. And so all of them would end up going off on their own separate 3-year training journey, where all of them would end up agreeing that they're going to be meeting back in the village 3 years from now, and that they're all going to be more powerful than they could ever imagine. Sasuke would go off to train with Kakashi. Now his training would be extremely fruitful because Sasuke training with Kakashi would be more along the lines of like Sasuke learns a ton of jutsus. He still ends up using a blade when it comes to his fighting style. He still ends up learning most of the jutsus that he learned alongside Orochimaru. However, he doesn't go about it in the evil manner that Orochimaru would have had him go through. And he isn't enhanced with drugs. This time, Sasuke has to work that much harder to close the gap between the original Sasuke and the Sasuke of the new timeline, where Deku is involved in the story. And so Sasuke's boosts are going to be a little bit different than they are in the original. When it comes to Naruto, he basically has the same training journey, except imagine him about 15% stronger, just due to the fact that he has a little bit more drive to become powerful, and he trains just that much harder. So when Naruto returns, he returns about 15% stronger. Those two stories essentially stay constant in the timeline. However, one of them that would not stay constant would be Deku training with Tsunade. In the original story, we have the trash bag Sakura actually being the one who was trained by Tsunade. However, this time, Tsunade and Deku are going to be building a really close relationship with each other, which pretty much revolves around mentor and student, where Deku is learning everything he possibly can for Tsunade when it comes to the medical ninjutsu, the 100 healings, learning how to put his chakra in his fist so he can hit harder. All the things that Sakura would have essentially learned in the time skip, Deku would have actually been able to master in 2 years, Byakuya seal included. And since Deku has a little bit more chakra than Sakura, actually a lot more chakra than her, he's actually able to make better use of it. So Deku is ultimately in a class of his own when it comes to learning stuff quickly. Deku does actually learn things relatively quickly, and seeing as he's way better than Sakura, and if she was able to learn it, then Deku should definitely be able to learn it way faster. So he's ultimately able to uncover a bunch of things that Sakura would have ended up having to take way longer to, approximately 3 years, in just 2. And after doing that, Deku would feel powerful. Yeah, he would, but something would be missing. It's as if Deku feels that he can get more powerful, that he can gain more strength, that this isn't the roof to his power. And so, with that 1 year left to train, Tsunade would actually end up saying that there is definitely one thing that they could probably do. Deku would ask what that is, and Tsunade would say that she ended up going through a training process in the land of the slugs. As Deku asks what she means, she would ultimately end up telling Deku that when she trained, she tried learning Slug Sage mode, and she ultimately failed. She wasn't skilled enough to actually master Slug Sage mode, and so she kind of ends up having an imperfected version of it instead of what she could have had. So Deku is pretty much thrown in that place for an entire year trying to master Slug Sage mode. Or if we want to make it sound cooler, then we could call Sage mode Namekuji Sage mode, which is pretty much literally the translation of slug to Japanese. But during his journey there, Deku was not able to master the original Slug Sage mode style. However, there was another form of Sage mode that Deku and all the other slugs had not really accounted for. Umiyushi Sage mode, which basically literally translates to water slug. And yeah, since Deku in this story is kind of going to be like think about this. Look, let me explain. Sasuke is scissors. Naruto is rock. Deku is paper. Naruto is wind. Sasuke is lightning. Deku is water. Think about that for a second. It makes perfect sense. And Deku not being able to master the original Sage mode, just like Tsunade was, would actually make sense as well. So when he ends up finding out about Umiyushi Sage mode, he ends up pretty much ending up learning this one way faster. It was akin to his nature, the water nature that, he pretty much already has. So he, instead of learning the normal Sage mode, would end up learning, as I said before, Umiyushi Sage mode. And with that concludes the 3-year time skip. Next part, we're going to be going into the Gar retrieval mission. Like for part 7.